Right as you get out of the massive Chapel of Anticipation, Elden Ring throws endless stretches of Limgrave at you, and it's something only a From Software game would do, because this much random exploration when you don't even know the sharp end of your sword doesn't make sense. But that also makes it both appealing and weird. Take the Tree Sentinel, for example. He's the first mini-boss you encounter at Limgrave, and he's also the mini-boss that's going to kill you the most. And once your bravado runs out, you realize you can skip him entirely and move on with your exploration. But among the questions that are left unanswered in the game, the biggest one is still, where do we go? So let's take a deep dive into the weird open world of the Lands Between, a place ruled by the Greater Will and home to weird species and even weirder regions. Let's start from the beginning. Tarnished wakes up to find his Finger Maiden has already been killed. This is a special one. He's surely destined for great things. Gruesome deaths too, but great things nevertheless. The moment you get out of the church, you get an eerie sense that something's wrong. Why is the chapel disconnected from the Lands Between? What is this sea of fog surrounding the whole chapel? We can see glimpses of a gigantic seaside structure, which we'll come to know as Stormveil Castle, but we can only see the silhouette of its majesty from here. But the most interesting question, why the anticipation? As we climb down the chapel and reach the courtyard with the weird Marika statue, it becomes clear that someone doesn't want the Tarnished to return to the Lands Between. First, you find your dead Finger Maiden, then this creepy grafted scion that will kill you a bazillion times, unless you're that one naked guy with a hat. There's a conspiracy at work here, and you're just getting started on the adventure. One interesting theory is that Miyazaki takes references from Kentaro Miura's Berserk. Take the sea fog. It's a spiritual barrier between two regions in physical space. Berserk also had spirit-infested seas to separate Elfhelm from reality. Then there's the Goat-Head Apostle. Just like the grafted scion, it has excessive limbs and distorted human anatomy, like multiple appendages growing where they shouldn't. He's also super fast, with animalistic movement despite mutations. The studio never confirmed any of it, all the more reason to speculate on the plausible causality. Data miners revealed in 2024 that the game's intro was originally planned to feature the Tarnished washing up on a beach under the seaside ruins before entering the graveyard route and meeting Melina and Torrent. However, in the released version, From Software opted for the Chapel of Anticipation ending. The biggest irony is how flawed the anticipation proved to be. Your guide is dead, and there's nothing graceful about the chapel. The grafted scion is waiting for you, and just to progress past, you need to die. Thanks Miyazaki, you sure know how to show a girl a good time. Now let's talk about Limgrave and the weirdness that spreads far and beyond. You come out of the stranded graveyard, climb through the first step, and the land opens into a green basin beneath a broken sky. But the geography never settles into anything ordinary. Venture northwest and you'll stumble upon Stormveil Castle, a castle that clings to the cliff as if the whole region was built to feed corpses into its gate. You face a siege line of warped soldiers, hawks, flamethrowers, and narrow battlements. And that's just to get inside the castle. The larger part of the castle is hidden inside layers of detritus, scaffolding, and sealed passages. The oddity isn't in the structure, but what lies all over the castle grounds. Narrow walkways, sack-filled storage rooms, hawk patrols, rotten banquet halls, secret drop-down paths, broken towers, and so many rotting dead bodies everywhere, missing limbs and decaying corpses. This is Godrick's lair, and with the gatekeeper Gostok constantly pillaging dead bodies for riches and spare limbs, there's always a lot of limbs for Godrick to feed on. Before Godrick turned this castle into a gross amalgam of broken appendages, an even darker entity ruled it. The Remembrance of Hoarah Godfrey states that he faced a powerful enemy known as the Stormlord during his early conquests. He led the war against the Giants, faced the Stormlord alone. After his victory, Stormveil came directly under the Golden Order's control. The Stormhawk King Ashes describes a king of hawks who ruled before the age of the Erdtree. The item description says, a sovereign hawk who ruled Stormveil long ago, which means that Stormveil Castle predates Godrick, predates the Shattering and likely predates much of the Golden Order itself. The story goes like this. Godric fled the capital after being humiliated during the wars that followed the Elden Ring's destruction. He was a weaker demigod compared to the likes of Radahn, Malenia, Morgau, or Rykard. He even disguised himself among women to escape conflict. Eventually, he retreated to Stormveil. Here he started stealing strength from others. Limbs from warriors, tarnished, soldiers, and creatures were stitched onto bodies in an attempt to create power through accumulation. The aftermath of these morbid experiments still plagues the castle, and trust me, the carnage is not for the faint-hearted. Let's venture deep into Stormveil Castle. If you drop down beneath the castle through the hidden route near the liftside chamber, you will find a gigantic deformed face fused into the roots beneath Stormveil Castle. The weird face connects the castle to one of the weirdest places in the game. The face under Stormveil Castle is a manifestation of Godwyn's spreading corpse. That's right, this morbid rotting corpse was once known as Godwyn the Golden, Marika Radagon's spoiled firstborn. But since it's Elden Ring, some stuff happened, and his soul was killed. But his body remained alive, and it slowly started to fuse with the roots of the Erdtree. In the lands between, Erdtree's roots are spread all over the world, so what better way to spread a curse than to infest the roots of the Greater Will's vessel? It's a widely believed theory that he was murdered in Leyndell, the capital, so let's visit Deeproot Depths, the dark, death-infested region directly below the capital. Geographically, it's a deep cavern at the root of the Erdtree. Just getting there involves some weird steps. By sleeping in a coffin after defeating the valiant gargoyle in Siofra Aqueduct. When you reach there, all the golden light of the Erdtree is dissolved into something unholy, a form of cursed infection called the Deathblight. At the center of it all is Godwyn the Golden's alter self known as the Prince of Death. Whoever is infected by the Prince's curse will turn into those who live in death, an unsettling mix of undead foot soldiers whose bodies inhabit dead souls. The body became the source of the corruption. Hey, by the way, are you loving this tale? We've got so many great locations coming up, so why don't you hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and we'll get on with it. In the lore, the Prince of Death grows to immense size, with Deathblight erupting from him and his face warped into a grotesque disc. What's even weirder is that his body remains in the posture of his assassination. So, just by looking at his deformed, fish-like face, you can reimagine his scene of failed execution. Those who live in death guard this region, which is understandably one of the hardest hit areas of the Deathblight. A curse so rotten, not even demigods dare invade this region. Rogear's fatal sleep is a clear example of why you should just get the Prince of Death's cyst and staff and get as far away from this undead nightmare as possible. Let's turn to Limgrave, for we have much darker and weirder regions to fulfill our enchanted wanderlust. Our next rendezvous is Weeping Peninsula, a mournful region in the southernmost lands between where it never stops raining. The gloomy region consists of cliffs, deep ravines, and poison swamps that Patches loves to drown you in. The roads are broken, while the ground is muddy and eroded with endless rainfall. As soon as you enter this region, you get the sense that something's gone seriously wrong. One of the biggest landmarks is Castle Mourne, anchoring the far south. This castle was also under the Lord of Storm's hold before Erdgre's influence won over. Godfrey fought the infamous Lone Revenger in this castle and defeated him. Who was this Revenger? Where did he come from? Our best guess comes from the Grafted Blade Greatsword, which states, "The storied sword of Castle Mourne, a Revenger's weapon. It is burdened with oceans of anger and regret." A lone surviving champion from a country now varnished was so determined to continue fighting that he claimed the swords of an entire clan of warriors. Castle Mourne is the center stage of one of the biggest, but probably the only successful rebellions in the game. For this, let's meet the Misbegotten. The lore states, the Misbegotten are held to be a punishment for making contact with the Crucible, and from birth they are treated as slaves, or worse. What do you expect from a cursed being that's been oppressed from the very beginning? They were enslaved, imprisoned, used as laborers, and denied social status. And the best part? Their name is part of Greater Will's propaganda, beings who should just be forgotten. Castle Mourne was full of misbegotten workers, and the oppression had dug deep roots of hatred in them. A bloody rebellion was on the brink, and before the Tarnished reached this castle, it happened. Under the leadership of the Leonine Misbegotten, they stormed the castle, and a bloody massacre ensued. There was so much bloodshed that the cruel part about the story no longer remained the oppression. We don't witness the losing battle, because when the Tarnished arrives, human defenders are dead, the castle walls have fallen, and the Misbegotten control the fortress. The Leonine Misbegotten has seized the legendary grafted blade greatsword, the same sword once held by the Lone Revenger. What's ironic is that the Misbegotten were not even considered an intelligent species. They were treated like animals by humans and the Greater Will. And by the time you reach Castle Mourne, it's collapsed, and these animals have established their rule here. The carnage here is evidence enough that the Misbegotten also considered humanity repugnant, and the same sword that once failed the Revenger's resistance against the Golden Order has now seen the face of victory. While we're on the topic of crucibles, dive deep into the Deeproot Depths, and you will reach an intricate pattern of tunnels, waterways, chambers, and dead-end service passages. There are a couple of very interesting secrets hidden within these watery graves of the outcasts. The area is full of narrow drains, flooded corridors, endless pipework that is almost impossible to keep track of, hidden drop-offs, cramped lift shafts, and isolated cells. Everything about this region screams death and banishment. You might think that a big city like Lanedale would require this huge sewer, but wait till you hear about its true purpose. Spoiler alert, it's in the name. In the deepest, darkest channels of the Shunning grounds, the banished omens are imprisoned. We'll start with the Omen twins, Morgo and Mohg. Omens were the surviving remnants of the Crucible, and the majority of them were either executed or disowned by the Greater Will. But, oh the irony, this was not the case with the royal omens like Morgo and Mohg. They were banished down here for eternity, each given their throne under the royal capital, but their right to rule the lands between was taken from them. Just because they had horns? They looked different? I don't know about the lands between, that's racist behavior all over. Mohg, the Omen, sits in the Cathedral of the Forsaken, a seemingly royal church long abandoned by Lanedale's royal guard. The walls, architecture and ceremonial layout, it's all grand until you face off against Mohg. Not the real Mohg, he's sitting beside Lady Tanith at Volcano Manor. Many theories suggest that this Omen version is his spirit. After all, that's what countless years of torment leave behind. The Grudge series is based solely on that concept. Defeat him and you'll discover an entire region hidden behind a false wall. This is a recurring mechanic and used throughout the game, a very elaborate method of concealing hidden paths and mini-quest areas. Once Mohg is vanquished, the altar behind the boss room disappears, and a forbidden path towards eternal chaos opens. The royal architecture fades. The path turns rugged, broken, almost deliberately destroyed. Bodies everywhere. And eventually, you reach the Frenzied Flame prescription, the deepest region of the lands between both geographically and lore-wise. Within these forbidden doors lies one of the most horrible endings of a Soulsborne game. Hyetta first appears at lake-facing cliffs and asks for a Shabriri grape, yellowing, oozing eyeball of the infirm. That's what they are, fiery eyeballs, a sure sign that you're in for a blazing surprise if you keep following this quest. Giving her the fingerprint grape moves her just outside the Frenzied Flame prescription. The walls here cast a weird white flame, illuminating this glowing red door straight out of the Stranger Things universe. Decaying bodies are scattered everywhere. Seems like the Greater Will did what had to be done here and moved out in a hurry. Talk to Hyetta for the last time. She's hell-bent on becoming your fiery queen. The origin of Three Fingers is more cryptic than the entire lore of the Greater Will. According to the Nomadic Merchants Chapeau, these nomadic merchants once thrived as the Great Caravan, but after being falsely accused of heretical beliefs, their entire clan was rounded up and buried alive far underground. Then they chanted a curse of despair and summoned the Flame of Frenzy. This burial was so brutal even for the lands between that it prompted the most nefarious outer god to come knocking on the lands between. Take off all your armor and gear and leave it here. No one's left alive to steal it. Reach the glowing door and it will give off an eerie glow. The roots will start burning as you open the door, and the flame cast will resemble the burning roots of a tree. The reign of the Greater Will is on the cusp of ending, and a much more sinister outer god has just found its exit vessel in the lands between. Three Fingers is scratching fiery patterns on the ground when it suddenly realizes your presence. It stretches, and you see the full might of the burning Three Fingers as it gets ready for a not-so-friendly hug. You accept its advances as the trembling fingers clench you. A dark ritual completes, and the fingers burst into powdery flames all over you. The Tarnished is now marked with the flame of frenzy. The crazed race eradicated from the face of the earth, and all the lands between has to show for this massacre is the newly marked Tarnished who's about to spread the eternal flame of frenzy. But that's just the start of our journey across the lands between. As soon as you get out of the Cathedral of the Forsaken and back to Limgrave, you almost forget all about the chaos you are destined to spread in the world. Look up to the sky for a change. You will see giants roaming all over the lands between. They're not your typical NPCs. They're giant walking mausoleums, each carrying a soulless demigod, according to that one Lenegrast lookalike spirit. His lines about the mausoleums are some of the most cryptic lore pieces in Elden Ring. The mausoleum prowls, cradling the soulless demigod, O Marika, Queen Eternal. He is your unwanted child. Each mausoleum has a gigantic stone tomb, 4 massive stone legs, thick layers of white barnacle-like growths, and a huge bell hanging beneath them. Many of these are laden with corpses and skull motifs covering the structure. What's more solemn than a giant walking tomb of dead royalty roaming the lands between for eternity? It almost seems like an ancient mourning ritual. In the extremely convoluted heritage of Marika Radagon, there are still some soulless, unnamed children that are still unaccounted for. Interestingly, the original Japanese translation of the term unwanted child is even harsher. Instead of unwanted child, it's closer to your ugly bastard or your ugly spawn. It could be a hint towards the omens, but I specifically remember mentioning the boss fight with Mohg's spirit, and the hard-hitting Mohg is too passionate to fight without a soul, so the omens are out of the question. But then there's another peculiarity with these lines. In all of the lands between, among myriads of NPCs, demigods, shard-bearers, and elder bosses, why is it that the ghost of a merchant resembling a character from another game is the only one who remembers the unwanted child? Because in my 127 hours of exploration in the lands between, I didn't find a single other mention of any soulless unwanted child of Marika. Honestly, these moving tombs remind me of the towering beasts in Shadow of the Colossus. That game made heavy use of distant footsteps and environmental scale for the colossi. The walking mausoleums do the same. Long before you see one, you hear bells, tremors, and giant footsteps. The differences between the two, however, are almost opposite in nature. Colossi contain the essence of Dorman, while the mausoleums store the dead bodies of unnamed soulless demigods. Arguably, the most beautiful region in the game is Nokron, Eternal City. To even grasp what a unique region this is, just remember that it takes the death of arguably the strongest demigod to open access to this region. I'm talking about Star-Scourge Radahn and the Radahn Festival fight. When Radahn's control over the stars is broken with his death, the stars are forced back into motion, and the sealed fate above ground finally breaks. When the sky tears open and the crater swallows the lands near Mistwood, we are finally able to visit this miracle of a city. This location is actually a pretty majestic and mysterious place. It's a whole city suspended in black stone, silver mist, and broken starlight. Nokron is carved into a vast hollow beneath the earth, and yet it's shaped exactly the opposite of a cave. Bridges stitch together collapsed neighborhoods. Water lies in open basins and channels, dark and still, reflecting ruin like polished metal. Grass grows in patches without sunlight, or any other apparent source of energy. The air is illuminated by ash-colored light. The buildings in this region feature a celestial design, majestic domes, spacious terraces, open courtyards and round chambers resembling observatories or ritual halls. And then you turn to the sky, and the weirdness creeps in. You are hundreds, perhaps thousands of meters beneath the surface, yet when you look upward, you don't see rock. You see a vast night sky scattered with stars. No sun ever rises over Nokron. The city is trapped in an endless twilight. Wisps of silver fog drift across the distance, while enormous stone formations disappear into the darkness above, making it difficult to tell where the cavern ends and the sky begins. That's what they are, a civilization tied to the stars, the moon, and a fate written in the heavens. This artificial sky appears throughout the underground regions connected to the Eternal Cities, including Nokron, Nokstella, and parts of Siofra and Ainsel river systems. The stars are fixed and eternal. No clouds ever gather. There is no weather. Time is not a concept here. Small stars shimmer with different intensities to give this artificial sky a realistic feel. Faint nebula-like patches spread across the darkness. Waterfalls descend from impossible heights, their sources hidden somewhere beyond sight. Now, why was such a brilliant place hidden under the earth this whole time? The answer is that Nox sought an age of stars and developed civilizations that looked toward the cosmos instead of the Golden Order. And there you go, another resistance against the Greater Will. Lands Between is full of them. So they were exiled beneath the earth. And what an ironic punishment that was. A culture that worshipped the night was condemned to live where they would never see the real night sky. So, according to some theories, they created the artificial sky themselves. It's not verified, but what else would you expect from a banished race that's trapped underground for an eternity? If you notice carefully, Nokron's stars have almost a perfect fluid motion. They don't move across the sky, and even the constellations never shift. Now, here's my 2 cents on the Nox sky. Throughout the Elden Ring, stars are not merely distant celestial bodies. They're tied to destiny. The movement of the stars govern fate, especially for figures like Ranni the Witch and the Carrion Royals. When Radahn halted the stars, he halted destiny. After his death, the meteor crashed into Limgrave and opens the path to Nokron. The city hidden beneath the false sky can only be reached once the real stars begin moving again. Visually, the artificial sky seems larger than the whole cavern. The horizon fades into darkness without revealing walls or a ceiling. Combined with the distant architecture and hanging ruins, the effect gives off a majestic sense of infinity. And the same is true for the enemies you encounter here. Mimic tears are the apex of that horror, especially the boss encounter that turns your own shape against you. So no matter how overpowered you feel you are with your build, the boss fight is equally hard. Now, let's get out of this beautiful underground nightmare and venture into the past. That is, the Age of the Dragons. The Remembrance of the Dragon Lord says, "The Dragon Lord whose seat lies at the heart of the storm beyond time is said to have been Elden Lord in the age before the Erdtree. Once his god had fled, the Lord continued to await its return." Which tells you a lot about how the Elden Ring treats time as a barrier. You are taken to Farum Azula after the Forge of the Giants, when Melina and the Flame have already done their work. The geography alone is enough to give you vertigo. Stacked terraces leading to infinite nothingness, fractured bridges, broken spiral ramps, and platforms hanging over open emptiness. The city of Novigrad, when Ultron lifts it high in the sky, is the only other pop culture reference I can think of, and even that is miles apart from Farum Azula's structural design. The storm is constant, with endless lightning strikes the only living characteristic of this region. But things become weird when we try to place this region on the scale of time. Crumbling Farum Azula was the hometown of an ancient race of dragons. This dragon age predates the rule of the Greater Will, so the whole timeline we'll be discussing related to this region will be before Marika was the Elden Lord. That's because during that time, Dragon Lord Placidusax was the Elden Lord serving an ancient outer god of that time. It's not named in Elden Ring's history, and by the time Greater Will found its vessel in Marika, it was long gone and forgotten. This brings us to the timeline issue. To get to the crumbling Farum Azula, reach the Forge of the Giant Side of Grace and talk to Melina. Or if you still have that frenzy flame inside you, then listen to the sound of the flames. It'll get you there. Now, here's my question. Where exactly have we been transported? The cutscene seems like a Hogwarts legacy enchantment, almost as if we're watching the memories of the Dragon Lord in a pensieve, but the fight is almost too real. So we can't surely be living in a memory, right? Again, we have to rely on what the game tells us definitively and what it hints at. We know that Dragon Lord Placidusax waits in a hidden chamber, coiled in a time-warped arena for one of the most colourful boss battles in the game. Some areas of Farum Azula, however, look frozen in the middle of destruction. Dragon corpses that you find appear older than the region itself. The biggest clue to the timeline conundrum here is in item descriptions. For instance, the Old Lord's talisman says, "A legendary talisman depicting the ancient king whose seat lies at the heart of the storm beyond time." We're talking about the Dragon Lord Placidusax's seat, of course, but not about Farum Azula in general. Then we have the evidence supporting that this region still obeys the Greater Will's timeline. Beastmen prowl the halls in packs. They're living beings of the lands between. The banished knights still roam shattered ruins all over. But the biggest evidence is the beast clergyman, Malekith's presence in the region. Being the ever-loyal servant of the Erdtree, he is guarding the Rune of Death in this region. If this region were in the past, Malekith and these other NPCs wouldn't exist here. Then there's the big one. After you're done with the Dragon Lord and return to the lands between, Leyndell Royal City is burning, and its structure has completely changed. All because of the atrocities you performed on the graves of the dragons in Crumbling Beast Grave. That hardly counts as time travel. This brings us to 3 classical theories about this region. Number 1 is that the whole Farum Azula exists outside time. Number 2 is that the whole city follows the general timeline of the game except for the Dragon Lord's boss fight arena. This one is the most probable since item descriptions from the region partially support it. Then there's the most interesting one. Theory number 3. The Tarnished actually travels back in time to defeat Dragon Lord Placidusax. The same can be said about the Godskin duo, a chaotic duo actively pursuing their darkest intrusive thoughts. Their lore introduces yet another religious cult figure, the Gloam-Eyed Queen. She was an Empyrean who wielded the power of destined death before Malekith sealed it away. What's even weirder about them is that Godskins wear robes stitched from the skin of slain gods and demigods. And since we're talking structures in the video, why not include these two? The Apostle is extremely tall and thin, has stretchy limbs, while the Noble is a big chunk of flesh with cannonball-type physiology. Like the Tarnished, they're also here to reclaim the destined death so they can live up to their title once again. You fight them at the Dragon Temple complex. The reason we're discussing the Godskin duo is because of a very famous time conundrum theory related to their boss fight. They have this resurrection mechanic where, if you kill either of the Apostles before the health bar is empty, the other one revives them. Fans wondered if it was because Farum Azula existed out of time, making their death temporary, hence the mechanic. It was never explained in lore, but hey, in Elden Ring, very few things are explained anyway. Simply put, the revival mechanic is not a result of Farum Azula's time distortion. However, the decision to put the duo in Farum Azula and introduce this mechanic is Miyazaki's cryptic, convoluted storytelling. So what have we discovered about the lands between till now? The deadly lush green scenery of Limgrave with all its colours and dangers. We've travelled to Stormveil Castle, a bloody sea of grafted limbs and grotesque body horror. We've descended to the dark and grisly Deeproot Depths, where death is just the beginning of horrors. Then there are the sad, gloomy forests of the Weeping Peninsula, a region that's mourning the injustices and cruelties of the lands between. Then we visited Castle Mourne, a place where we can hear inhuman cries of the misbegotten and their evil masters and can't tell them apart. We made a reluctant stop at the Subterranean Shunning grounds, dark and deep sewer dungeons where Mohg and other fell omens have found their haven from the judging eyes of the Greater Will. Here we also visited the Three Fingers, the harbinger of fiery chaos across the lands between. We didn't visit the loathsome Dung Eater while we were down there, because our journey is already quite disturbing as it is. We took a solemn ride on the walking Mausoleums, the last remembrance of an unnamed Empyrean. We We freed Destiny from Radahn and ventured underground to Nokron, the Eternal City, a forgotten civilization banished by the Greater Will in the worst way possible. Next, we took a little trip down memory lane in Crumbling Farum Azula, where a forgotten legacy awaits the Tarnished, for one epic showdown with the Dragon Lord Placidusax. And knowing the lands between, let me tell ya, we have much more to discover throughout this majestic world of magic and wonders. Now, some regions in the game are relatively small, but have a much larger story to tell. Moonlight Altar is one such region. It's located on a high, hidden plateau above southwestern Liurnia, cut off from the rest of the world by sheer drops and impossible vertical space. Even while wandering in Liurnia, you can see its distant majesty, but for most of the game, it's impossible to reach. What makes this region weird is its deep ties to one of Elden Ring's most interesting questlines. But to even begin to describe this location, we need to visit two other regions. The first is Nokstella, Eternal City, located in Ainsel River, Maine. Just like in Nokron, you will find an abundance of silver tier enemies in this region. These enemies are a failed result of Nox's experimentation with flowing metal lifeforms. The successful ones turn into mimic tiers, one of the best summons in the game. The item Moon of Nokstella is linked to a black moon guiding countless stars, confirming that Nokstella is also tied to the lunar star symbolism. The city eventually leads to Lake of Rot, which inflicts Scarlet Rot if you linger long enough. The lake is tied to a sealed outer god. The map description says the divine essence of an outer god is sealed there. Upon further close lore analysis, we discover yet another failed outer god influencing the lands between. This was the outer god of Rot, defeated by a blind swordsman who used a flowing sword, then sealed beneath the Lake of Rot. This didn't make much sense, did it? The blind swordsman is a great unnamed warrior who, according to the prosthesis wearer heirloom description, was Malenia's mentor and was given a flowing sword by a fairy in blue. Now, who is this outer god of Rot inflicting the lands between with such a screwed up plague? It's never named, but we know that the Scarlet Rot is its divine element in the world, a form of death that also produces life and rebirth through decay. The lore says that its physical presence once appeared as a great scorpion in the underground ruins of the ancient dynasty, which was defeated by the blind swordsman and sealed away in what is now the Lake of Rot. Gameplay-wise, this is why the Lake of Rot has the highest Scarlet Rot infliction rate compared to other rot zones like the Haligtree drainage channels or the abandoned cave in Caelid. Once you have safely passed the Lake of Rot, all that's left to do is to go sleep in this coffin, and this will transport you to Astel, natural born of the void, an illuminated insect-like celestial creature. It has multiple elongated arms ending in claws, but the weirdest thing is the mesmerizing glow inside its body. Lore-wise, it's not an ordinary boss. You're literally fighting a star. Its remembrance states, "Remembrance of Astel, natural born of the void, a falling star of ill omen." It is said that this malformed star struck the Eternal City and took away their sky. So the Greater Will wasn't the only enemy the Nox had. Other outer gods also sent their demigods after them. If you look at falling star beasts located across different regions, their origin is also linked with a cosmic void. Astel is the apex form of these falling star beasts. Once you have defeated Astel, you unlock the path to the Moonlight Altar using the Deep Ainsel Well lift. It's the only route to the altar in the game, but this lift ride is totally worth it. Once you reach the Moonlight Altar, the first stop is the Cathedral of Manor, a ruined church located at the far end of the plateau. Ranni's ultimate questline will bring you there. The building is partly broken open, with a huge hole in its floor leading down into the chamber where her two fingers lie dead. This setting is weird for myriad reasons. One, till this point in the game, we have only come across the mention of the two fingers in dialogues, item descriptions, and lore fragments throughout. For the first time, we see a physical manifestation of these divine messengers of the Greater Will. Then you notice the next peculiarity. Ranni's doll is lying right next to the dead fingers. The first thing you notice about her is that her body is burned and has red hair from Radagon's lineage. Let's take things into perspective here. During Ranni's quest, you bring her the Finger Slayer blade to aid her struggle against the Erdtree, but after you've given her the blade, there's not really much to her questline. You defeat the Baleful Shadow, an evil version of Blade, sent by the Greater Will to hunt down Ranni. Then return to the Raya Lucaria Grand Library, a region we have yet to discuss. Find the Dark Moon Ring, and you're done ring shopping for your upcoming marriage. A key detail many players missed is the huge crater on the roof of the cathedral. Why is it there? Is it linked to Ranni's efforts to kill her body? Did the Two Fingers arrive on the scene through this crater? Or was it another divine interference to aid Ranni in her struggle against the Two Fingers? There are many lore theories about it. However, I choose to side with this theory. Since she effectively killed her body using a small fragment of the Rune of Death during the Shattering, Greater Will's control was already weak on her. Then we killed Blade and the Baleful Shadow, so the Greater Will lost all the good cards. All that was left were the Two Fingers. However, once the Erdtree's control was lost, Ranni's lunar outer god entered the picture. With their help, Ranni slew her massive Two Fingers, essentially freeing herself completely from the Golden Order's control. When all is said and done, you put the Dark Moon Ring on her body, and Ranni appears to tell you that she said yes, and the wedding will be planned only after the Tarnished has slain Radagon and the Elden Beast. This is one of the coolest endings in the game, called the Age of Stars. Pun intended. Because when you choose to fly away with Ranni to Cold Eternity, you're not abandoning the people of Lands Between. You're distancing yourself from the petty problems and giving them a gift of free will. The bloody Two Fingers were Greater Will's last effort, and killing them has pushed Greater Will on the back foot. One of the most beautiful locations with the most disturbing lore in the Lands Between is Jarburg. At first glance, it just seems like an average town. The first peculiar thing you notice about this region is how peaceful it looks. There is a serene ambiance all over the village. After all, Leonia of the Lakes is a very calming place for anxious souls. You reach it by descending the gravestones jutting out from the eastern cliff. The village has its own site of grace, placed in front of a building on the southern side of the settlement. Gravestone paths, tiny buildings, flower beds, and jars are placed around the region. Nothing too out of the ordinary. But then you see the main reason it's called Jarburg. Living jars moving all over the village. Huge jars with tight seals over their mouths. The lore says that living jars are brought to life by human flesh and blood. And even though the main game didn't give much of an origin story, Shadows of the Erdtree brought out a whole new level of weirdness to the living jars. It traces back to Bonnie Village and the Hornsent culture, where condemned people, especially shamans, were mutilated, stuffed into jars, and fused through ritualistic processes to create saints. And if that's not enough to gross you out, just destroy one. These jars contain human innards of dead warriors, fighters, champions, and basically anyone who died in their vicinity. Their best feature is how the jars grow themselves. Let's take the example of Iron Fist Alexander, the warrior jar. After the Radahn festival, Alex will be seen collecting flesh and blood of the fallen warriors during the fight. Before the Tarnished kills Radahn, countless warriors have tried and failed to defeat the demigod. So the region of Wailing Dunes is like an all-you-can-eat buffet for warrior jars. Despite their morbid morphology, the living jars are mostly peace-loving creatures, minding their own business in Jarburg. There are, however, some mighty, zealous warrior jars like Alexander who become inspiration for other living jars like Jarban. In Crumbling Farum Azula, you meet Alexander the warrior jar for the final time, and after fighting him at his request, he will honor your bravery in fighting the Dragon Lord and die. Its jar structure bursts open in a bloody dance of carnage and flesh. If you collect Alexander's innards, you've earned yourself a noble purpose now. Return to Jarburg and give these innards to Jarban. He will be beyond thankful, and the collective soul fragments of fallen warriors inside Alexander will become motivation enough for him to leave his peace-loving way of life and get ready for his own adventures. But the weirdness of Jarburg isn't just limited to one questline. Their bodies are considered very valuable for jar fragments. They're always in danger of a poacher attack. They're looking for Potentate, a caretaker for the jars who has soft hands so they might not break the jars while taking care of them. Then the game introduces us to Dialos of the House Oslo, a rejected knight from Volcano Manor who arrives in Jarburg and takes on the job of the Potentate. However, the peace-loving region of Jarburg was left in ruins with the Great Poacher's Raid. They laid everything to waste, killing a lot of jars in the process. Dialos bravely fought these poachers and saved many jars. Ultimately, he succumbed to his injuries and died. With the intensity Jarburg tells you about Dialos's heroism, I believe he collected Dialos's innards himself. So, in a way, their savior lives on through them. From one messed up village to the next, let's visit the village of Albinaurics, located in Leonia of the Lakes. Built into the cliffs beneath the plateau, you can see the Moonlight altar from here, but can't reach it. Here you meet another cursed race by the name of, you guessed it, the Albinaurics, a life form made by human hands. In the shipped game, they were created in the Eternal City from a primordial drop of night-tinged dew, said to be forsaken to the lands between by the stars. They possess silver blood and an innate arcane affinity, which is why some of them can use magic. What's weird is their character design. All Albinaurics have a physical disability. Their legs eventually fade, and when that happens, they die. The first generation is especially severe. They're gaunt, bearded, unable to walk, and many compensate by using glintstone sorcery. The female archers are also impaired and ride a wolfback. This region is important since it contains a huge traversal shortcut item. The village was the last sanctuary for the Albinaurics before an annoying know-all by the name of Sir Gideon Ofnir sent his minions to look for that specific item. The item is a medallion piece required to reach Michaela's Haligtree. In the village, old Albus holds the medallion. He's an elderly Albinauric survivor in the village. He hides in a pot disguised near the depraved perfumer root. Hitting the pot reveals him, and he gives you the right half of the Haligtree's secret medallion. Now, the first order of business for the Tarnished is to care for all the people in the lands between. So, before we take on Gideon Ofnir himself, there's a huge persistent problem lingering over the village. The Omen Killer was sent by Gideon to massacre the Albinaurics in the village. Obviously, we can't let it happen, so the Omen Killer has to go. Next, visit Old Albus and the secret Haligtree medallion, and we're all set to discover our next weird destination. But here's another weird questline tied to the village. The tale of Latenna the Albinauric. She is yet another soul tormented by Gideon Ofnir and wants to be taken to Michaela's Haligtree for sanctuary. However, the story is not that simple. Once you have old Albus's medallion piece, she converts into a spirit ash summon and leads you towards the second half of the Haligtree medallion, which is in Castle Sol. Use the secret medallion option at the Grand's Lift and Rolled, and you'll end up in the consecrated snowfields. A frozen river runs all the way through the snowfield, and the route leads to Michaela's Haligtree. It's the final trial for those who reject Erdtree's order and are looking for a haven. Even the map text and the region description say it's a passage for those who are not chosen. But let's get back to Latenna. You reach Apostate Derelict, where you meet Philia, towering little sister. She is this towering Albinauric woman who is sitting inside the church. She doesn't speak at all, just stares into the snowy abyss, almost as if waiting for one final piece of good omen. Latenna brings that with her when you summon her spirit ash inside the church. The quest ends with Latenna's final words. "Ah, my poor sweet sister, you're finally here. No need to fret. A new birthing droplet will soon arrive. The cycle can begin anew." Then she hits her with the birthing droplet, Miyazaki's way of saying that the Albinaurics will return in Avengers Doomsday. Now that we're done with the tale of the Albinaurics, the weirdness of this region hits like a deadly snowy blizzard all around you. Just take refuge in the hidden dungeon of the Haligtree. It's a creative amalgam of filthy, shadowy catacombs and deadly puzzles. You decide that it's time to go skydiving. Just jump down the invisible portions of the dungeon. At the midpoint of the main staircase is a broken railing. It looks like a fatal drop, but a massive invisible platform network exists beneath the staircase. Players can walk across open air to reach hidden alcoves and lower chambers. In this transit route, the game introduces the next big puzzle mechanic of the region, invisible traversal paths. You see similar invisible floor puzzles in the Heretical Rise and Ordina, Liturgical Town, which is where we're going next. Ordina isn't your typical Valentine or Strawberry. It's a seemingly abandoned town with a few ghosts and snow-covered alleyways. It's the final stop before the Haligtree. So, in anticipation of the big location coming up, many players didn't expect much from this location. They were wrong. After thorough exploration of the region, you still don't find a way forward. What do you do now? In this confusion, you come across this big black circle drawn on the ground. Just interact with it and you will enter an Everjail. For those of you who don't know what an Everjail is, it's a magical prison created using the power of the Golden Order. Throughout the lands between, they appear as large circular stone platforms marked by glowing sigils. Activating one transports the tarnished into a sealed pocket dimension. Knowing this, interacting with this eternal prison shouldn't be a unique experience, right? Well, you're wrong again, stupid. Once you interact with this one, it simply transports you into an alternate version of Ordina. You are constantly hunted by Black Knife assassins and trained archers all over the region. Your goal isn't to defeat these assassins and archers, and I say this with a loud thank God, because the assassins are invisible except for their footprints. However, even these footprints are insanely difficult to see in the whiteness of the snow. They're immune to almost all of your attacks, and they mostly appear behind you, grab you, and stab you in the back, almost leaving you for dead. If you encounter one, you'll just be diving uselessly in the snow. So, the next best thing is to escape the area and avoid them entirely, which is again easier said than done. The real goal here is to light 3 candles held by statues of Michaela. Once you do that, the barrier to Michaela's Haligtree is open, and we witness an even weirder part of our journey. Michaela is the cursed child of Marikan Radagon. He abandons the Greater Will's rule after realizing that the Greater Will couldn't cure Millennia's Scarlet Rot. He turned to unalloyed gold and chose the Haligtree as his sanctuary and future order. The Haligtree was meant to replace the Erdtree. Misbegotten, kindred of rot and Albinaurics, all were welcome here. Even the name supports this purpose. The word is tied to Old English Halig, meaning holy or sacred. Michaela watered the Haligtree sapling with his own blood while it was still young, then embedded himself in a cocoon in the roots to nurture it and push it toward becoming an Erdtree-like god tree. That plan was interrupted when Mohg abducted him from the Haligtree. After Michaela vanished, the tree began to decay. Even after his abduction, a silhouette of a young person with a hole in the torso can still be seen in the roots where Michaela's cocoon once rested. To make matters worse, the clean rot Knight Finlay carried Millennia's sleeping body to the Haligtree roots, where she waited for Michaela's return while continuing to spread scarlet rot through the tree. There you have it, folks. One way or another, Great Will always finds a way to corrupt its competition. This corruption is particularly evident in Elphael, Brace of the Haligtree. Here, Scarlet Rot has caused the most damage, and it's all because of Millennia, Goddess of Rot. She was the one who infected Radahn in the first place, causing all the Eternal City's ruckus. So now what you're left with is an abandoned struggle against the Greater Will, a broken sanctuary for those who still believe in resistance against the Erdtree, and those who are simply refugees of the cruel lands between. Let's take a trip to Liurnia of the Lakes for a change. Our destination is a cliffside settlement in northeastern Liurnia called the Frenzied Flame Village. It shows all the signs of ruin in its structure: collapsed stone cottages, narrow paths, and compressed terrain throughout the village. Lore-wise, the village is affected by the Flame of Frenzy. All the villagers, including the Rhea Lucaria soldiers roaming in this region, are affected by this frenzy. Now, you might be thinking, the 3 fingers are sealed tight in the Shunning grounds, so why is this Sauron-looking eye blazing over this tower? This is the Frenzy Flaming Tower. This blazing eye periodically manifests above the tower and builds madness on anything in its line of sight. With the note titled, The Lord of Frenzied Flame, this region introduces the darkest arc of the game. There's even a fruit located in this region called Ive Yellow, which looks exactly like the color. Then there is the Yellow Ember, which is described as an ember taken from a corpse's eye socket, a sign that the deceased suffered from the Flame of Frenzy. In this village, the flame is described as a force that manifests in the eyes of those stricken by grief and suffering. A person loses their individuality, and it's so potent that it can even melt away eternal spirits. The followers of this cult are called Chaos Followers, people who have fully succumbed to this madness and now desire a lord who will incinerate what divides and distinguishes, that is, a new vessel for the 3 fingers. Whenever we discuss the Frenzied Flame, we can't ignore Shabriri. He was the earliest recorded figure tied to the Frenzied Flame. Item descriptions state that his eyes were gouged out as punishment for slander, after which the Frenzied Flame manifested through the empty sockets. That connection to eyes carries through the rest of the Frenzied Flame content. Hayata's consumption of grapes is explicitly tied to eyes. Frenzied flame incantations originate from ocular imagery and burning sight, and fingerprint grapes are presented as charred eyeballs rather than fruit. As soon as you get out of the stranded graveyard, Dragonburnt Ruins is the first dungeon you find in Limgrave. It's right next to Agheel Lake. And in case you were wondering, Agheel is the first true dragon encounter in the Lands Between, not like that time-traveling dragon lord in Farum Azula. For someone who has just tested their sword on a couple of low-level NPCs, you're not ready for fights like these. But that's not the most interesting part about these ruins. Dragonburnt Ruins features the game's first ever fake reward. You fight a few weak enemies, find a staircase leading underground, kill some rats, and discover a treasure chest. Everything about the setup leads you towards a reward. However, things aren't always what they seem. As soon as you interact with the treasure chest, it evaporates like a fallen demigod. Instead, you are transported straight to the depths of Celia Crystal Tunnel in Caelid. What's ironic is that there is a real treasure chest elsewhere in the same ruins. One cellar contains the genuine reward, the Twin Blade. But as your luck turned out, you only got to the transporter trap. Celia is an active underground mining operation. Difficulty-wise, this is one of the hardest and most enemy-saturated regions of the game. After you have transported here, the game throws in an additional prank. Fast travel is disabled, and you can't escape using any site of grace. So most players get their first taste of the Kindred of Rot. Some glintstone miners have spent entire lifetimes extracting crystals in these mines. When you link these diggers with Raya Lucaria, an even weirder realization comes up. These miners were failed scholars associated with the Academy, so they were punished with this eternal labor. This lore reveal stays hidden for most players since most of us are too busy trying to survive the endless ambushes of the Kindred of Rot. And if you make it deeper still, the Falling Star Beast. This creature resembles a fusion of an insect, a bull, a crustacean, and a meteorite. Not a very pleasant sight, but I highly doubt you'll see this every day even in the game. After all, you can't just visit Astel or the Elden Beast every day. But there is something of equally opposite proportions that we haven't discussed yet. For that, let's visit the Eternal Cities. You will find many variants of Silver Tears, the Nox experimentation to create artificial life. Silver Tears are formless metallic lifeforms created by the Nox. Their item descriptions describe them as creatures of mimicry that repeatedly imitate life. But what about this big giant ball that keeps rolling towards you? The answer is, they're giant variants of the Silver Tears. Data miners found out that the internal name for ordinary Silver Tears is Marika lineage slime, and the internal name for the giant spheres is Mother Slime. Can you believe that their relationship could be as simple as that? Apparently, Miyazaki didn't want anything simple either, so they changed them to nameless enemies with known origins tied to the Silver Tears. It might not count as evidence, but players have seen one sphere in Nokstella literally hanging from the ceiling while smaller Silver Tears drop beneath it. That's a mother organism shedding offspring in any universe, and you won't convince me otherwise, so don't try. Let's leave the Lunar Lights and visit the bloody fires of the Mohgwyn Dynasty. We will be talking about Mohg, the Lord of Blood now, not his lesser Omen version you encounter in the Shunning Grounds. The dynasty was founded by Mohg the Omen after he made contact with the Formless Mother, an outer god that craves the blood of its followers and then some. For this, he created an army of warriors who carry out bloody executions through the Lands Between in the name of blood sacrifices. The base of operations is the Mohgwyn Palace, a hidden underground region on the western edge of the consecrated snowfield, or by using White Mask Varay's Pure Blood Knight's Medal, the same Varay who taunts you for being maidenless. I almost always make it a ritual to kill Varay the second I see him after every New Game Plus, which I think is well deserved. Most of this region is a blood-red lake that is infested by giant crows, rotten dogs, and elite sanguine noble warriors. The whole atmosphere of this region is enough to weird you out as soon as you enter it. However, the weird part is what Mohg actually intends to do. He abducted Michaela from the Haligtree, brought him to the cocoon of the Empyrean, and tried to raise him into godhood through blood offerings. His ultimate plan is to make himself Michaela's consort and use his ascension to legitimize the Mohgwyn dynasty as an authentic ruling order. He's using Greater Will's Empyrean against itself. But we don't plan on letting the Formless Mother rule the Lands Between. The aftermath of the blood rituals in the Mohgwyn Palace is already evident. Albinaurics in Mohgwyn Palace are altered by Mohg's accursed omen blood. They turned into omen-like creatures with red skin and sprouted horns. His boss fight is especially notable because this time he unleashes his full arsenal of blood attacks, inflicting very high bleed buffs on the player. I believe that out of all the outer gods, Mohg's formless mother is the most nefarious of them all. One thing that becomes evident as you continue your exploration of the region is that Mohgwyn Palace wasn't built by Mohg. Instead, it's part of an older civilization that once occupied a much larger chunk of the lands between. The structural evidence is sufficient to support this claim. In regions such as the Siofra River, the Nokron outskirts, and the Nokstella adjacent areas, you can see similar architectural design. Giant stone pillars that seem too heavy for any current culture of the lands between to manipulate. The shipped game lore also suggests this fact. Lore analysts of Palace Approach Ledge Road say, the Palace Approach Ledge Road is found beneath a set of ancient ruins at the Mohgwyn Palace on the Siofra River. The path leads to a sprawling lake of blood pooling around enormous petrified trees. Then there is the map description of the palace that says, in the lightless depths lies the grave of an ancient civilization. It is here Mohg, the Lord of Blood, is building his palace. It's important to note that the note says Mohg is building his palace. He hasn't already done that, because when the Tarnished arrives at Mohgwyn's palace, all that's present in the name of the Blood Order is Mohg with Michaela's cocoon that's yet to be matured. A small army of Mohgwyn foot soldiers and less than sufficient sacrifices in the name of the Formless Mother. So essentially Mohg is a beta loser who's seeking divine help to hide the fact. Right. Now we'll be ending things with the most blasphemous location of the lands between, aka the story of Rykard and the Serpent. Volcano Manor is located atop Mount Gelmir in the Altus Plateau. It's the home of Praetor Rykard and his recusants, fierce warriors who waged war against the Erdtree. Rykard wasn't always bad. He's the son of Radagon and Ranni, whose job description under the Greater Will was that of a ruthless inquisitor. His job took him to Mount Gelmir, a region filled with sheer cliffs and harsh weather. You pass the Road of Iniquity on your way up to the mountain, which is named after Rykard's old job. He discovered the ancient magma hexes of a forgotten serpent-worshipping religion and instantly found his true purpose in the lands between. During his Inquisitor days, he created the Iron Virgins or the Abductor Virgins, used to seize heretics and deliver them to Volcano Manor for questioning and torture. There's an interesting detail linked to one of these enchanted machines, at the bottom of the giant water wheel in Raya Lucaria Academy. If it kills the player with its grab attack, the player is automatically transported to the Subterranean Inquisition Chamber. It worked for the Greater Will Rykard, and as you will see, it works for the Lord of Blasphemy Rykard all the same. Volcano Manor wasn't always this blasphemous. It was the Rykard's base of operations under Greater Will's jurisdiction. It all changed for the worse when Rykard committed the ultimate blasphemy. He fed himself, rune and all, to an ancient serpent living beneath Gelmir, merging with it. In his own words, he became a Serpent King, poised to devour the very gods. During his research on the god-devouring serpent, Rykard had amassed a good number of followers. Among those were corrupted Tarnished, warriors, and heretic scholars. But they got what they deserved when Rykard feasted on his greatest champions. Item lore says that they became the Lord's family in the Serpent's bowels. Even in an unforgivable place like the lands between, not many people dared to witness this debauchery, so many of his followers abandoned him. Some of them even tried to hunt him. All of them failed and were devoured by the Lord of Blasphemy. It may be hard to believe, but something good did come out of it. One of the fallen champions left behind a Serpent Hunter Spear, a sacred weapon capable of killing Rykard. It remains in Rykard's chamber and is used by the player to defeat him. After his transformation, the manor was run by Lady Tanith, a foreign dancer who became Rykard's consort. She recruited strong Tarnished to join the blasphemous cult. New members, including the player, are given contracts to hunt other Tarnished in service of Rykard's legacy. Those who complete a certain set of assignments are brought before Praetor Rykard, the Lord of Blasphemy. But instead of getting praised for their efforts or a decent paycheck, Rykard devours them to absorb their strength, and the endless cycle of the ritualistic sacrifice goes on. Hey, just wondering, are you still awake? Why don't you watch our video on Dark Souls that we did? So many facts about Dark Souls, you wouldn't believe how many facts about Dark Souls. It's on your screen right now. How about you click it and we'll see you there. I'm Adam with Syrric, and once again, thanks for watching.